Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going to be going over a friend of mine's build. His name is VisionGL. He actually hosts most of our community races, our weekend community races. So the races start on Friday and they end Tuesday. And pretty much they are the only thing that gives us anything to do while we're waiting for patches. So big props to him for keeping the game alive while, we're waiting for new patches. He has done a gigantic service to the community, and I am proud to be able to showcase his first build on the channel. So this is Solo Archmage. So this build has had a lot of ups and downs, but mainly due to a few new pieces of tech that has been introduced this patch. It definitely is a lot better, thanks to the new AI specifically. So he's running a Pyromancer while also running the Solo Archmage setup. So pretty much what you do is you have one Archmage, right? Instead of 5 mages, you just have one, and he gets double the amount of projectiles. So instead of your normal stereotypical 3 projectiles, he actually shoots out 5. And that's pretty strong. The biggest issue with this kind of setup, though, is the fact that those projectiles don't pierce. But with an Archmage, with the Infernal Shade setup, with as much attack and cast speed as it can get, it means that those projectiles not piercing, it's not as big of a deal thanks to how much damage he's doing, especially with the full crit setup with Dread Shade, which is another part of the build. So he's utilizing Dread Shade to turn on auto crit, kind of like how Solo Golem works. This build will be a lot more like a Solo Golem or Solo Abomination build, as it's using the same setup from Dread Shade and Infernal Shade. And then for the last skill he's obviously using Volatile Zombies for the chance to cast Mark for Death on death so that you can reduce the enemy's resistances. So overall, the build I've seen performs really well, considering I had no idea that Solo Archmage was viable, but thanks to the minion AI, like I said, him being a lot more aggressive, and now he's utilizing Infernal Shade's buffs, the movement speed and the attack and cast speed, at least for the Archmage is anyways, it's using those buffs a lot more. Now, this kind of setup wouldn't work, but thanks to the nodes that give you health on crit, percentage health on crit for the Archmage, it does give you percentage health on crit, meaning that every single time he crits with his attack, right, he will actually, heal himself up to full pretty much every single time, which allows him to run the gigantic amount of degens that Infernal Shade and, of course, Dread Shade gives him, which is like one of the issues with this kind of build. But thankfully, because of that fact that he gets so much health on crit, that makes up for all that degen. Now, one kind of map mod I'm noticing while watching this footage that you should probably avoid is crit avoidance, as if you're not critting with the skeleton, right, he won't be regenerating his health back. So I would heavily suggest avoiding crit avoidance, as that will cause your minion not to heal back as much, because he will heal for each crit, meaning if you crit 5 different enemies, he will heal about like 20% of his HP 5 times, i.e. healing him up to full. So that's kind of why he's able to sustain the Dread Shade with Infernal Shade. Now the Infernal Shade, normally Infernal Shade's pretty bad because of its setup, it does no damage, but its role as a minion buffer is definitely understated most of the time. So it can give up to 72% increased attack and cast speed and movement speed. Now, usually for most builds, this doesn't work because that Infernal Shade's cost, i.e., actually taking damage, the minion will take damage, right, is normally not good to like actually take, right? Like you don't want to, you don't want your minions to take damage. You want them to survive, right? But thankfully, thanks to the insane amount of sustain that Archmage has, and since all your stuff is just like pretty much to resummon a new Archmage is on a 6-second cooldown thanks to Dread Shade's auto crit node, right? It's very easy just to resummon a new Archmage. And I'm like looking at this footage, and the Archmage has an insane amount of movement speed, making it very easy to pretty much follow you with monoliths, while normally that wouldn't be the case, especially last patch. But thanks to just how powerful the Archmage is, and now that like minion power is a thing, and now that like minion cast and attack speed is so easy to get. Like, the Archmage is a lot better than it used to be. Now, you used to be able to go Icicle Marksman. I mean, like Icicle Mage. And the biggest issue with that, well, you could actually shotgun with the icicles that he did. But now they removed that. So the Pyromancer is better because it has a better base attack speed. I believe the Pyromancer is a 1.2 base attack speed, while the Icicle ones have like 1.0. The Icicle ones are have a lot more base damage though, so if you just want more bang for your buck, that's better. But thankfully, because of the fact that he needs to be attacking as fast as possible, because you need the crit so that your Archmage doesn't die to all the insane amounts of degen, right? So that's mainly why he's running Pyromancer over the Icicle version. Well, that being said, let's get into the build planner, shall we? Here we are in planner with the build, so we're going to go over the skills real quick. So for Archmage itself, he's going to take 4 points into Splinter Dominion, so he gets extra projectiles so that he shoots more, which is how he's actually getting that many projectiles. Then he's grabbing Archmage. Now, Archmage pretty much doubles the damage and the HP of the Archmage, and also doubles the projectiles as well, allowing you to actually clear maps with it, right? And the reason why that's so strong is because you can put Dread Shade and Infernal Shade on it and make it do a lot of clear. Now he's also running 4 points into Argonautic Speed, because the more cast speed you have, the better. 1 point into Aussie and Frenzy, so you get the Frenzy chance, so he pretty much always has Frenzy, right? Then 2 point travel into Cellar Mortis, the base crit and the movement speed don't matter. Then, of course, 3 points into Grey Merchant, so that he gains maximum health gained on crit. This is how he's sustaining his Archmage through all the insane amounts of degen, thanks to the auto crit on Dread Shade, right? Then, of course, Pyromancers, turning them into Pyromancers. A hidden part of this is they have a 1.2 base cast speed, I think, while the Cryomancers have a 1.0, but these have higher base damage, so it's kind of like wishy-washy what's better. But for this setup, Pyromancers are definitely better. Then 1 point into, I know my camera's blocking it, 1 point into Infernal, which is making it so it removes mages. Then 5 points into Gravetide for the minion flat. Since your minions start out at 20 flat, I believe, this almost doubles your damage on top of everything else, which is insanely strong. Then for the next important skill, we have Dread Shade. Dread Shade is very important for the build, as Dread Shade gives you about, I think it's like 50% more, 25% more damage, but they take, a degen over time. But you're going to go down here, take 3 points into Lingering Doom, travel. This doesn't matter because you're going to turn that degen into a poison. The reason why we turn it into a poison is because that degen can actually get resisted by minion resistance, right? Which is very strong. Then 1 point into All for One, so that you're not giving any aura buffs to all your other minions, which doesn't matter because you're only running one minion, so you deal 100% more damage, which is why he's doing such large crits with the Archmage itself. Then 1 point into Egoism for the minion always crits, which is very strong. I know my camera is blocking it, but pretty much you can see minions always crit, and the cooldown plus 6 seconds. So there's a 6-second cooldown added to Dread Shade, but your minion always crits, which is insanely strong, meaning you don't have to invest into crit multi, you don't have to invest into crit chance at all, just crit multi, and you'll be doing a lot of damage. 1 point into Blind Flurry. Since he auto crits, the blind doesn't really affect him much, and since he's shooting projectiles, the increased cast is it's all worth it, definitely. Then 2 points into Spectral Presence, travel. 3 points into Dying Coven for even more attack and cast speed, very insanely strong. Then 4 points into Grim Fate for even more damage, right? Then 1 point into Flesh Harvest. So one thing I would suggest myself is I would definitely take 2 points out of this and go into Flesh Harvest, as the missing HP, right? And the buff effect is insanely strong on this kind of build because your Archmage is going up and down on HP, meaning that all the buffs from this tree would multiply insanely, right, with the increased buff effect, thanks to how much missing HP the Archmage has. Now for the last skill that's important, so he's grabbing Infernal Shade, so he's taking 3 points travel into Influence, 1 point into Devour and Flame, so that you can add it to your minions, right? Then 1 point into subjugation. So Infernal Shade's damage increases for each second active. That's why the minions will die eventually with Infernal Shade on it, which is sad, but it allows you to get to 3 points into demonic possession, which allows you to get all the way up to 72% increased movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed, which is absolutely insane for any solo minion build, as much movement speed as you can get. It's really nice. Then 1 point into Soulfire so that it has an unlimited duration on minions, meaning you can just throw it on your minion once. Then 1 point into Burn Trail as well, so you get even more movement speed, which is insane. That's why Infernal Shade's so strong for minions, is it gives them so much movement speed. That's why it's really good for like Abomination and any other kind of like solo minion build. Then 5 points into Ignition for the mana efficiency and the cast speed. That's really strong. That lets you apply your buffs faster and less mana. Then for the last stuff, he just grabs Duration and Slow Chance. Doesn't really matter what else you grab. Like, really doesn't matter. Those are the most important nodes. Then for Transplant, he's chosen to do a different setup. So you actually, the main setup here that's important is that he's grabbing Rain of Blood Travel so that he can get to Violent Emergence for that 20% kill threshold. Very strong on bosses, especially when they have like Endurance. So for instance, this is a very strong node now, because if you grab Endurance on your keywords, if you did not know, the Endurance keyword on the Monolith of Fate, right? So 20% of their HP they get for Endurance. So for instance, they have the 60% increased Endurance, right? They'll take 60% less damage after they go under 20% health. Well, kill threshold on here is 20%. So as soon as they hit that Endurance threshold, you can just Transplant on them and kill them, making most bosses a complete joke with this build, especially Oribus. Like, Oribus is a complete breeze with this build, as long as you don't get hit, obviously. And of course, increased minion damage. You want as much increased global minion damage as possible because you're using multiple elements with your build. Then all the bone armor stuff, the stereotypical bone armor stuff. Then for Volatile Zombie, the main setup you need to know about is he's actually running even more kill thresholds, so 16%, right? Then he's also running Corpse Bane, so Volatile Zombies will apply Mark for Death on hit. This is actually how he's getting his Mark for Death. He's not running Bone Curse, he's running this instead. And, to each their own. This is definitely an interesting way of applying Mark for Death, so I think it's definitely like a, option. One thing it does give you, it also gives you Fear, so it pretty much disables Oribus for about 3 seconds, so that's a funny little thing I didn't know about. You can actually fear Oribus. I did not know you could fear Oribus. I thought it was like Lagan or whatever, where the fearing doesn't actually work, but it's like bugged out and stuff. Alright, that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passive tree here. He takes 8 points, obviously, into Forbidden Knowledge for the Intelligence. Intelligence is very strong for this build because the more intelligence you have, the more your minions scale, specifically your Skeletal mages. So he gains 5 HP per intelligence and 4% increased damage per intelligence, and that's one of the best ways of scaling their damage, as it's increased damage that's global. So if you add any kind of flat damage, it still increases all of their damage, which is very strong. Then he just grabs as much cast speed in the tree as possible for his minions, because you want as much cast speed as possible. In the Lich tree, he's grabbing even more intelligence, right? More cast speed, health. He's running this node, reduced health on his minion. So since he's always healing the full, the Archmage, you can actually run this node and do fine. He's running 5 points into Frantic Summons for the cast speed, right? 5 points into Effigies for the increased minion fire damage, which is most of your damage. And it also saves you as well if you get to really low life, which is kind of cool. 10 points into Moonlight Pyre for a lot of flat, because like I said, your minions always start at 20 flat, so this is like literally doubling your amount of flat that you start out with. Then 8 points into Cling to Life for minion all res. So since his Infernal Shade is dealing fire damage and his Dread Shade is dealing poison damage, right? This will reduce the amount of time. This will reduce the amount of degen he takes, which is very strong. Then 10 points into Rite of the Undeath for increased minion elemental and necrotic damage, which affects all of your damage for this specific build, because you're either running necrotic because of this node, or you're running fire because of this node, and because he's running pyromancers. So this is a lot of increased damage for free. Then he takes 10 points into Blaze the Forlorn for the chill chance on like freaking Oribus, or in the minion critical strike multiplier. Now, we're going to talk about gearing here. The most important thing I really think he could do with gearing, mainly, is they did introduce a new thing here, this patch. They introduced a new set, where is it? Set wand, I believe. I believe it's a set wand. No, it's a set one-handed blunt weapon. Yes, it is. So the Cynthia's set unique. So the main reason why you'd use this is the all res to minions, and that will actually reduce the amount of degen your minions take. I would heavily suggest grabbing this, and also grabbing the set shield as well, as it will give you a +1 to minion, minion skills. It will also give you a lot of health, and will also give you minion critical strike avoidance. I would heavily suggest grabbing this. It also gives you 25% to all res as well. That's the only thing I would suggest doing myself, like for the build, as this just gives you an insane amount of like resistance and just everything that you could possibly want. It even gives you +1 to your solo Archmage, which you could probably grab something like, grab some health leech. Yeah, probably grab some health leech here, so he sustains even harder, right? And one thing I could think about for the passive tree here, I would think about grabbing River of Bones, so it gives him even more sustain, so that, you know, obviously, but like, that doesn't really matter, right? But that's like one thing I would suggest with the gearing, right, is grabbing the Cynthia's set, as it's so insanely strong for this kind of build. Now for idols, he's running increased minion fire damage idols. That's the most important part. If you get increased cooldown recovery speed Transplant, good for you, but mainly you want the increased minion fire damage. For here, increased minion fire damage, increased health. That's insanely strong thanks to the idol changes. Then for your helmet, the most important part about this is you're getting that 15 flat, as that 15 flat on the helmet is insanely strong with this build, as it gives you a lot of flat damage. Like I said, your minion starts out with 20, so any amount of flat is an insane amount of added damage. Now he's also running the increased skeleton mage damage and the increased minion fire damage, which pretty much applies to all your damage. He's running a death rattle. Death rattle was actually nuked from orbit recently, but thankfully, since he's running dread shade for the auto crit, you don't really have anything else you'd want, so you definitely want a well-rolled death rattle for this build. And you're also running double minion ring for the crit multi, right? Increased minion damage, intelligence. Same thing for this ring as well. Very strong, very strong. Then for the chests, increased minion fire damage, increased skeleton mage damage. This is how he's pumping out so much damage with the skeleton mage. Increased health as well. Then for the belt, he's running increased minion damage, just a little bit of dodge, but it doesn't really matter. Increased health. You're trying to increase your health as much as possible so that you don't die, because you've gotten to the point where your skeleton mage won't die, right? You need to make it so you don't die, right? Increased minion damage, intelligence, health, increase just even more health. Like I said, you're stacking as much health as possible. Now this relic is an insanely strong relic for this build, because it's 91% increased minion fire damage. You get the +2 to skeleton mage as well, so you get to +3 in total. Like I said, the only thing I would suggest probably running is probably an Omnis at this point, but it doesn't really matter. And then of course the increased endurance and the health. For blessings, he's running endurance, so he's endurance capped. He's running a little bit of cold res, so he's capped on cold res, but with this Cynthia's Dying Breath, you'd probably have to redo your reses. Crit avoidance, obviously, so he's crit avoid capped. Lightning res from Lagan, because it's like the best blessing from Lagan. Then health as well, so you get as much health as possible. So like I said, I would heavily suggest getting the Cynthia's Dying Breath set, as it's proven to be insanely strong with this kind of setup, because that 25 to all res to minions, it just means 25% less damage overall from your Infernal Shade and your Dread Shade, and that's normally the thing that ends up killing your minion. And it also increases resistance against enemy attacks as well, so this just pretty much means 25% less damage taken for your minions, right? Which is insanely strong, mind you. And of course the minion critical strike avoidance, making it so that you can run crit mods on the monolith and not give a shit, which is insanely strong as well, right? And that's pretty much it for the build guide today. I'm sorry for the less quality. I'm kind of busy. With that being said, thank you all for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.